Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another Coffee with Conrad. Today, we're going to be talking about ETL. This topic came up because I've touched upon it, but I really needed an explain like I'm five so that I could explain it better to our clients and our prospects that are calling us. So, how you doing this morning, Conrad?
Good,
So, I
good.
have a little bit of understanding about this. Basically, I mean, it's moving data from one place to another. But part of this is also about improving what you can do with data in the process, right?
Yeah, well, first off, let's have a little fun this morning because you were laughing at the title that I put for here for the slide. What was it? What was the public title for it?
It just said what is ETL, but
Oh.
internally, yes, our OneNote did say WTF is ETL.
I think that makes for a better title. Yeah, it is interesting because when you think about ETL, which here, as you can see, it's extract, transform, and load. Um, if you've been in the IT industry a long time, I've been in it, ooh, goodness, getting close to 30 years. Um, this naming or this acronym and its function really has remained unchanged in terms of categories. What really changed is the process and the tools, as it always does in IT, that you need it. But fundamentally, the problem still exists today. So, let's just break down a couple of these pieces and then talk about, where these things get improved. So, because this may have been the first time you've had to even hear this concept of these terms. So, the real simple version is look, you have data out there, and in this view here, your data could be this could be a spreadsheet, right? It could be tabular data, a CSV file, all kinds of these different sources that are there. Or let's say source number two, you have some other type of relational storage or some well-defined structured data like SQL Server, MySQL. Your data source above could be a file server, could be SharePoint. Get a bunch of spreadsheets, and so you have all these different data sources, and one of the tough things sometimes is just being able to connect and get that data. So so again, you have these different data sources, but you have this goal, right? You have this goal where you say, well, I have this other data warehouse. Now, what do you do with data warehouses? Normally, you have transactional or real time or active systems. A lot of times we think about e-commerce, right? People are shopping and doing those things, but so there's to be a high performance system that's tuned and organized in a way to be fast, take orders, be reliable. But it's running what you need, but a lot of times you want to then analyze what's happened, and to do that, you need to look at it in a way that's organized and collected in a way that makes sense for the types of questions you want to ask it, which normally is done in a very different way than the high performance active transactional system. So this has been the traditional view of, well, I want to get some of that data and put it into a data warehouse. Well, why not just do a backup restore? Why not just do log shipping? Why not just pump the same copy into another server and look at there again? Because your questions are going to be organized differently, and sometimes you want to collect information. So one data source might be from something like, let's say, HubSpot, because that's where you do a lot of your online marketing. It might be where you're storing your CRM information. Actually, you're doing a lot of great stuff inbound marketing through HubSpot, but for some crazy reason, you also have Salesforce where you are keeping track of all your customers because it's through another acquisition. And your other data is from another billing and invoicing system that you use to do this. And so, but you want to get a view of how many of the people that I market to actually purchase, what is the purchasing trend? And I also want to look at, well, once they purchase, what types of products ended up generating me more money, right? So that's the classic sales and marketing side of it. But there's other areas too that you might want to get into. So anyway, but if they're in different systems, there's something special. Well, one is they're in different places, so I have to somehow be able to make calls against them. So if you do want to collectively put it together, and this is called the transformation, because in HubSpot, they like to store the dates in a very Linux type of format. So when you look at it, it's like, what the heck is this? And the data that I get out of Salesforce, they give me a date that's a longer date, but it has, a lot more information in that date, and it's on the UTC number. And then I have this other system that gives it to me, and it's a short date. But when I go into the load, I need all those things to be consistent. So this is what the transform engine will do, is it'll say, oh, well, you get to make decisions of, well, when I do move this data over, I want to restructure that data in order so that it's consistent and it maps. And I also want to reorganize how the data is going to go look in the end. And then now I get to push it into some of the storage that I might want to go use. So now that I have in the storage environment, that fundamentally just takes care of the ETL process. Saw some data, the one I wanted to collect, I transformed it and whatever I wanted to be consistent and structured, and then I loaded it in the appropriate data store. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. However, you normally have the next set of things you want to go do with it, right? Where you put your data is tells you what type of opportunities you can have with that data. So if you wanted to move that data into other types of SQL databases and tables, you could do that. Again, it's a very structured, managed way. And sometimes you don't want to create another copy, another structure. So there's some areas like even with SQL 2019 where you can still access that other data like a SQL, but it's actually stored and computed in other systems. And so it's a way of, what other people used to have, they used to call them data marts. You can create these smaller data warehouses and then have like a bigger data warehouse or other system on top that connects them together. But it's like I had to create infrastructure for infrastructure and for infrastructure. And sometimes you need it. Then you go to even bigger ones where you're doing, what a lot of times started with like MapReduce type systems. Hadoop was a big one. I have Spark, where you can get a lot of unstructured data, and shared storage is basically future nerdy tech talk around shredding data across shared data storage, where they all see one big data store, but they don't all have the data directly. It's very cool. Anyway, where you store it in the system, then you can start to ask certain questions. So there's no one right answer. It really depends on the data, the volume of data, the types of data that you want to interact with. So kind of in this new model, this new world of well, I do have all this data that I want to deal with, and it does come from different places. And some of that data, I don't even house that data. It could be a RESTful service. And so sometimes I do need to collect it and store it because they only allow me to make certain number of queries. So I may want to drip it in as I get it so that I can still do things with it. But I don't really want to leave that service. I just need to be able to interact with it a little bit better. So it's a cool thing called Azure Data Factory that allows you to really do this. Now, before in the older model, and it's still kind of there, SQL Server Integration Services was the method to do this, and it was a little cumbersome. You can still create that and actually still run it in Azure. There's a service for that too. But if you can use the Data Factory and then connect to that data directly, the factory will allow you to essentially do the ETL process for you, and then store it either in data lakes or some other service that you want to put it into. In the end, you can then do something interesting like through Power BI that you can then look at that store and then have it. Now, the interesting thing about Power BI is that Power BI doesn't actually need all that coddling. Power BI can itself connect to different data stores and allow you to transform that data inside. It doesn't perform as well with a lot of data that it has to transform. It could take even longer. So sometimes you do want an external process to do that. But what I found very good is if I can put in Power BI, connect to those different data services, do a lot of the transformation. Even once I get to a dashboard, I'm like, yeah, this is pretty good, but it just runs slower. It doesn't take me long. Ooh, look, I got a little typo here. It doesn't take me long to actually to say, oh well, but now I know what I need to look at, and now I understand what data needed to be transformed or added or whatever. So then I can, you can give that to your database expert or developer to go put it into the ETL process and data store and make it very high performant, because we kind of figured that out. Sometimes, a lot of times, people start the other way. They're like, well, let's start fixing the data problem. They create all this data and infrastructure and put it in there, and then somebody will get the data analyst and put it on top, and they'll go, man, that just doesn't give me what I want. Can I get this data? And they're like, well, we're gonna have to go back and reshape everything. So sometimes it's good to like go into Power BI and create that view, even though it's slower, even though it's not gonna be as performant, and just get a good feel of what that's going to look like, and know that that data modeling and structure and transform is going to work the way you want. Then you're like, yeah, that's very close. Now let's have it do this. And then switching that up on the Power BI side is super easy, and then it'll work really, really fast. So anyway, so that's the thing, is that don't overspend time on the ETL process when you haven't really looked at how you want to analyze the data. Kind of prototype it with Power BI or something. Get a good feel for what that is, and then you can start making decisions about how or where you actually want to transform that data, because this will have a very profound view of what to do that. And it's just a great way to start. Anyway, but that's WTF of ETL and kind of some of those future tools that you can use. And at the end of the day, Power BI is the one that is just phenomenal at being able to visualize all this. So it's great to prototype, and then it's great to be at the end, to have this great dashboard that's available on phone and whatever to go use it. It's really good.
Excellent. Thank you, Conrad.
Yeah.
And as you started to walk through this and you were talking about e-commerce, so earlier when we were prepping for this, I talked about the fact that I'd only ever really dealt with SQL, but I've done a number of POS migrations in my life. And this is the exact process, only it was our transform process was sitting there with Excel and just fixing fields manually for hours and hours and hours. So yeah, seeing what a modern company would do with this is enlightening. So thank you very much. As a reminder, you can ask questions there in the questions panel. I haven't seen any come through yet. So Connor, if you can back up a slide, I have a question. And I ran into
you
this
would.
when we were part of the data center modernization team, and we were working with those three guys from Microsoft. They kind of talked me through data lakes, data warehouses, data bricks, and then data factories. How are those different?
Wait, what data factory and the data bricks?
There's bricks, there's lakes, there's warehouses, and I figured a warehouse was just full of bricks. But is this a computer science course that I'm asking for right now?
No, actually, why don't we set up a separate one to just talk about these pieces together? Because today I was just talking about these overview pieces, and we can go into them, because this is a point where if I only give a little bit of an explanation, it becomes more confusing than the other piece. So I think it's better if we just kind of work through it that way. But
excellent.
I will say this as a whole, the ability to house these types of data services in Azure, I really feel makes such a difference for organizations that normally this would require extreme investments in infrastructure, software, people, and consulting services. And I'm talking tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get even close to value. And that's the biggest thing I want people to understand, right? Like, do you pay money when you use Azure? Of course you're going to use money. Could you spend a lot of money? You absolutely could spend a lot of money. But here's the difference. You can get the amount of time and cost to value going through this process is much shorter and much cheaper to yield that valued results, even when you know that the first two steps you did aren't really that great. Let's be honest, your first two times you do things, it's just not that great. But you get to it faster and you get to it cheaper. And that's what makes the difference. So when you do start to spend a lot of money, it's because you're getting value from it. When you do this the traditional way, or where you may be doing it today, or just you're not able to do it at all, it's because it takes that level of investment to do it. So that's the one thing. And the second thing is customers tend to spend, and I'm not saying customer, but as a whole, you'll tend to say, well, but I've already invested all this money in this infrastructure I have, right? I mean, if it's working for you, great. But if you know that you have, and normally people, I think we have a topic coming up around vendor consolidation. A lot of that's around the software and the services. Sometimes you want to move to it earlier because most of your contracts are disjointed, right? Your total licensing, hardware, support, all that for everything you have. Normally, one is next year, one is next month, one is whatever. So if you look at the totality of them and the one that's the soonest, think of that as your end date, and then start to retire stuff and start to move everything over faster, because you'll just never keep up, and then these things just get better, faster, and cheaper. Your other stuff does not, and there's no glory in maintaining the things that we bought 3 years ago. But anyway, so that's what I think is so different, is the time and cost to value is shorter and phenomenally cheaper than you can in any other way outside of the cloud.
Great. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Conrad. I have not seen any other questions come through, so I do think you clarified this quite a bit for me. Hopefully it was a benefit for people on the line right now and people who are watching this on YouTube. If you are watching us on YouTube, give us a like and follow. Reminder that you can join these by going to agilet.co/CWC, and we've got a registration form there that will get you all signed up, and we'd love to have you as part of our audience. And yeah, we will see you next week. Thank you, Conrad.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.